King and pawn endgames look simple. Just kings and pawns. But they contain some of the deepest ideas in chess. The concept of opposition can turn a draw into a win or a win into a draw. Master this, and you'll win endgames that others can't. Welcome to one of the most important concepts in chess endgames, opposition. Look at this position. The two kings stand face to face on the e-file, with just one square between them. White's king is on e6, black's king is on e8. This is called direct opposition. Here's the key idea: the player who must move is at a disadvantage. Why? Because kings cannot move to a square adjacent to the other king. So the side to move must step aside, giving the opponent access to critical squares. In this position, it's White's turn. White has the opposition. That means Black, when it's their turn, will be the one forced to give ground. If it were Black's turn right now, Black would have to step aside, and White's king would advance. This simple concept, who must move, decides the outcome of countless endgames. The player who has the opposition controls the game. The player who must move must yield. Now let's add a pawn. White has a king on e4 and a pawn on e5. Black has a lone king on e8. Can White promote the pawn? The answer depends entirely on opposition. Here, White plays king e4 to f5, or king e4 to d5, stepping to the side. But the strongest plan is to advance the king ahead of the pawn. White plays king d5. Now the king is beside the pawn, ready to escort it forward. The critical rule in king and pawn versus king: the king must go ahead of the pawn, not behind it. If the white king can reach the 6th rank ahead of the pawn, White wins. So from d5, White's plan is to maneuver the king to d6, e6, or f6, always staying ahead of the e5 pawn. Once the king reaches the 6th rank in front of the pawn will promote no matter what Black does. The king clears the path, and the pawn follows. Now look at a position where the pawn does not promote. White has king on e3, pawn on e5, and Black's king is on e7. Notice that Black's king is directly in front of the pawn, and the kings face each other with 3 squares between them. It's White's turn. White plays king e4, approaching the pawn. Black responds king e6, maintaining direct opposition. Now White has a choice. If White plays king d5, Black plays king d7, staying in opposition. If White plays king f5, Black plays king f7. Black mirrors White's moves, always maintaining the opposition. Eventually, White must push the pawn. After e5 to e6, Black plays king e8, standing right in front of the pawn. White plays king e5, but now Black has king e7, opposition again. White pushes e6 to e7, and Black plays king d7. Now the pawn is on e7 and White's king must move. After king d5 or king f5, Black plays king e8, standing in front of the pawn. The pawn cannot promote. It's a draw. When the defending king can maintain opposition in front of the pawn, the game is drawn. Every pawn has a set of key squares. If the attacking king reaches any of these squares, the pawn will promote no matter what the defender does. For a pawn on e5, the key squares are d7, e7, and f7. These 3 squares on the 7th rank, directly ahead and diagonally ahead of the pawn, are the key squares. If White's king can reach d7, e7, or f7, the pawn promotes by force. For a pawn on the 5th rank, the key squares are always the 3 squares 2 ranks ahead of the pawn. For a pawn on e4, the key squares would be d6, e6, and f6. For a pawn on e3, the key squares are d5, e5, and f5. The farther back the pawn, the easier it is for the attacking king to reach the key squares, because there's more room to maneuver. Here's the practical takeaway: in any king and pawn endgame, identify the key squares for your pawn. Then use opposition and outflanking to get your king to one of those squares. Once you're there, the pawn promotes. It's a mathematical certainty. Triangulation is one of the most subtle ideas in king and pawn endgames. Sometimes you reach a position where you would win if only it were your opponent's turn to move. The position is perfect, but you're the one who has to move, and any move you make ruins it. The solution? Lose a tempo. Make your king walk a triangular path, returning to the same square but having wasted a move. Look at this position. White has king d4 and pawn e4. Black has king d6. White wants to advance the king, but if white plays king d5 directly, black plays king d7 and has the opposition. The draw. Instead, white can triangulate. White plays king c4, then king c5, then king d5. 3 moves to reach a square that was only one step away. But now it's black's turn to move. White has successfully transferred the move to black. Black must step aside, and white's king advances. The triangular path, d4 to c4 to c5 to d5, achieves what a direct approach could not. This works because the white king has access to squares the black king doesn't, allowing it to take a longer path. Let's see opposition decide a real-style endgame. This position features a symmetrical pawn structure. Both sides have pawns on e and f, locked in place. The kings are on e4 and e6, facing each other. It's white's move. In symmetrical positions like this, the player with the opposition wins. But right now, white must move first, which means white does not have the opposition. If white plays king d4, black plays king d6, maintaining opposition. If white plays king f5, this appears aggressive, but black plays king f7, and again holds the opposition. The game is drawn because black can always mirror white's moves. But what if black made a mistake? Suppose it were black's turn. Black plays king d6, and now white plays king f5. White has outflanked. Black's king went left, but white went right. Now white threatens king g6, attacking the f6 pawn. Black must respond, and the symmetry is broken. White wins the f6 pawn and promotes. This is why opposition matters even in complex pawn structures. One tempo, one mistake, and the game is decided. Here's a practice position to test your understanding. White has king d3 and pawn e2. Black has king d5. It's white's turn. How does white win? First, identify the key squares. The pawn is on e2, so the key squares are d4, e4, and f4. Wait, that's only one rank ahead. For pawns on the second rank, the key squares are actually on the fourth rank, d4, e4, f4, and also the sixth rank, d6, e6, f6. White needs to get the king to one of these squares. White should play king e3, advancing the king ahead of the pawn. Now the king is ahead of the pawn and ready to push forward. After black plays king e5, white plays king f3, heading to the right. Black plays king f5 to maintain opposition, but white plays king e3 again, and black must decide. The plan is to use triangulation and outflanking to reach a key square. Remember, advance the king ahead of the pawn. Use opposition to force the defender aside. Reach a key square, and the pawn promotes by force. These three principles, opposition, key squares, and triangulation, are the complete toolkit for king and pawn endgames. Opposition, the player to move must give ground. Key squares, the squares your king must reach to guarantee promotion. Triangulation, the art of losing a tempo. These three concepts decide king and pawn endgames.